has nothing to do with bullets. It happens in the silence between orders, in the seconds before a commander opens his mouth and changes the course of history. June 5th, 1944, 4 in the morning, 150,000 soldiers loaded into ships. Their supreme commander stands alone in a library. Rain lashes the windows. Wind howls across the English Channel. The weather is falling apart, and he has to make a decision that will either save the world or hand victory to Hitler. Here's his problem. He has two options. Both are suicide. Option 1, postpone the invasion. Wait another month for better weather. But that means the Germans strengthen their defenses. Intelligence leaks. Stalin loses patience and makes peace with Hitler. The war could be lost. Option 2, attack now in terrible weather. Paratroopers will scatter across Normandy in high winds. Landing craft will be swamped in rough seas.
Bombers can't see their targets through clouds. Thousands will die before they even reach the beach. But here's what makes this the most dangerous decision in military history. To have any chance of success, this commander has to violate the most fundamental rule of warfare, the rule that's written in every military manual, the rule that's been drilled into every officer since the time of Sun Tzu and Clausewitz. He has to divide his forces. 5 separate beaches spread across 50 miles of enemy coastline. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword, with no guarantee they can support each other if things go wrong. This is the cardinal sin of warfare, the unforgivable mistake. It's how Custer died at Little Bighorn. It's how thousands of paratroopers were slaughtered at Arnhem just months after this decision. Every military academy teaches you, never divide your forces in the face of the enemy. Because when you divide your army, the enemy destroys you, piece by piece, one unit at a time.
Before they can... There's a moment on every battlefield that has nothing to do with bullets. It happens in the silence between orders, in the seconds before a commander opens his mouth and changes the course of history. It's the moment when a single human being, exhausted, uncertain, surrounded by incomplete information and conflicting advice, must make a choice that will either save thousands of lives or condemn them to annihilation. And here's what they don't tell you. The most dangerous decisions on the battlefield aren't made in the heat of combat. They're made in the cold calculation beforehand, when there's still time to think, still time to doubt, still time to realize that what you're about to do violates every rule you've ever been taught. Picture this, a command tent, somewhere in history. The maps are spread out. The intelligence reports are contradictory. Your advisors are split down the middle. Half of them are urging caution. The other half are demanding action.
Outside, tens of thousands of soldiers are waiting for your orders, unawares that you're about to gamble their lives on a decision that military academies have warned against for centuries. You can hear the distant rumble of artillery. The clock is ticking. The enemy is moving. Your allies are watching. And you have to choose. Not in an hour, not tomorrow. Now. What makes a battlefield decision more dangerous than the battle itself? It's not the enemy you're facing. It's not the odds stacked against you. It's the weight of irreversibility. Once you give the order, there's no taking it back. The ships have sailed. The troops are committed. The die is cast. And if you're wrong, history won't remember your reasoning. It will only remember the corpses. The greatest generals in history, Napoleon, Caesar, Washington, Eisenhower, all faced this moment. And every single one of them admitted the same thing in their private writings. They were terrified, not of dying, not of losing. but of being the person who had to decide. Because here's the paradox. Defensive decisions rarely win wars. Playing it safe might avoid disaster, but it guarantees slow defeat. To win, you have to take risks. You have to violate doctrine. You have to make the dangerous decision. And the most dangerous decision of all is the one that every military manual, every tactical textbook, every experienced officer will tell you never to make. Yet some commanders made it anyway.
You've seen the movies. The general standing on a hilltop, jaw set, eyes fixed on the horizon. He surveys the battlefield with perfect clarity, then delivers his orders with unwavering confidence. No hesitation, no doubt, just pure, crystallized certainty in the face of chaos. It's a beautiful image. It's also complete fiction. The reality of command is something far more human, far more terrifying, and far less cinematic. Real commanders don't stride confidently into history. They stumble into it, second-guessing every step, haunted by the ghosts of previous failures, knowing that their next decision could echo through the centuries as either genius or catastrophe. Take Napoleon at Waterloo, the man who had conquered most of Europe, who had won impossible victories through sheer audacity and tactical brilliance. June 18th, 1815, he had one chance to destroy Wellington before the Prussians arrived, one window of opportunity, and for hours that morning, he hesitated.
The ground was muddy from overnight rain. Should he wait for it to dry so his artillery could maneuver, or attack immediately before enemy reinforcements arrived? He waited, and that hesitation cost him everything. The Prussians showed up. The French Imperial Guard was shattered. Napoleon's empire collapsed. And for the rest of his life, exiled on a remote island in the Atlantic, he replayed that morning over and over again. Not the battle itself, the decision, the paralysis, the moment when doubt crept in and froze one of history's greatest military minds. Or consider George Armstrong Custer at Little Bighorn, a Civil War hero celebrated for his aggression and courage. June 25, 1876, he spotted an Indian village along the river. His scouts warned him it was massive, far larger than intelligence had suggested. He had a choice: wait for reinforcements or attack immediately to prevent the village from scattering. He chose aggression. He divided his forces to attack from multiple directions, and within hours, he and over 200 men were dead, annihilated. The decision took minutes. The dying took an afternoon. The second guessing lasted generations. This is the part they don't show you in the war films, the crushing psychological weight of command. Politicians make decisions and read about the consequences in reports. CEOs make choices and see the results in spreadsheets. But battlefield commanders see the immediate, bloody aftermath of their judgment calls.
So what actually happens inside a commander's mind when everything is falling apart? Fighter pilots call it the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's the cycle your brain runs through in combat. You observe the situation. You orient yourself to what it means. You decide on a course of action. You act. Then the loop starts again. In theory, it's clean, logical, sequential. In reality, it's a nightmare. Because here's what they don't tell you. Every step of that loop is built on sand. Your observations are incomplete. Enemy positions you can't see. Reinforcements you don't know about. Intelligence reports that are hours old or flat out wrong. You're trying to observe a situation that's changing faster than you can process it. Then comes orientation. You have to make sense of chaos. But your staff is shouting conflicting assessments. Your subordinate commanders are sending contradictory reports from the field. One says the enemy is retreating.
Another says they're regrouping for a counterattack. The fog of war isn't a metaphor. It's the fundamental reality of combat. You're trying to orient yourself in a situation where the truth is deliberately hidden, accidentally obscured, and constantly shifting. Now you have to decide, but time is collapsing. Every second you delay, soldiers are dying. The enemy is moving. Opportunities are evaporating. You don't have the luxury of certainty. You have to choose now, based on information you know is incomplete, advice you know is biased, and instincts you're not sure you can trust. And here's where it gets worse. Not all decisions are created equal. Tactical decisions are dangerous, sure. Which hill to take, which flank to reinforce, which trench to assault. Get it wrong and people die. But tactical decisions can often be corrected. You can pull back, regroup, try a different approach. Strategic decisions are different. They're about whether to fight at all. Whether to retreat or stand your ground. Whether to divide your forces or concentrate them. Whether to attack now or wait for reinforcements. These decisions carry exponentially more danger, because once you make them, you cross the threshold of irreversible commitment. That's the moment when the decision cannot be undone, when the ships have left port and can't turn back, when the paratroopers have jumped and are falling toward enemy territory, when the cavalry has charged and there's no recall. The die is cast, and if you're wrong, there's no second chance. Throughout history, dangerous decisions fall into categories. The decision to retreat, abandoning ground you've bled for. The decision to charge.
September 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte stands in the smoldering ruins of Moscow. He's just won the greatest victory of his career, capturing Russia's ancient capital. But the city is burning. The Russians have torched it themselves, rather than let him have it intact. Winter is coming. His supply lines stretch back 1,000 miles across hostile territory. His army is starving in the heart of enemy land. He has to decide, stay and hope the Tsar surrenders, or retreat while he still can. He waits. Weeks pass. No surrender comes. By the time Napoleon orders the retreat in October, it's too late. Winter catches his grand army on the open road. 600,000 men marched into Russia. Fewer than 100,000 staggered out. Frostbite, starvation, Cossack raids. The retreat from Moscow didn't just destroy an army. It shattered the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. Within 2 years, he was finished. The decision to retreat saved his life, but condemned his empire.
The decision to attack. Death rides at Balaclava. October 25, 1854. The Valley of Balaclava, Crimean War. Lord Cardigan receives an order to charge. The problem? The order is vague, passed through multiple officers, each one interpreting it differently. Cardigan sees Russian artillery positioned at the end of a valley, with more guns on the heights on both sides. A death trap. Any cavalry officer can see it. But orders are orders. 670 British cavalrymen draw their sabers and charge directly into the Russian guns. They ride through a storm of cannon fire from 3 directions. The slaughter is immediate and total. Within 20 minutes, over 200 men are dead or wounded. The survivors reach the Russian guns, fight briefly in brutal close combat, then retreat back through the same killing ground. The charge of the Light Brigade became the most famous military disaster in British history.
A decision to attack based on a misunderstood order. Courage without purpose. Bravery wasted on a catastrophic mistake. The decision to wait. Washington's gamble. December 1777. Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. George Washington's Continental Army is freezing, starving, and falling apart. 12,000 men huddled in crude huts. No supplies, no pay, desertions every night. Meanwhile, the British are comfortable in Philadelphia, 20 miles away. Washington's officers are begging him to do something. Attack, retreat, disband. Anything but this slow death by attrition. Washington chooses to.
It's the first rule they teach you in any military academy on Earth. Never divide your forces in the face of the enemy. It's written in every tactical manual, drilled into every officer candidate, repeated by every military theorist from Sun Tzu to Clausewitz. The principle of concentration of force. Mass your strength at the decisive point. Hit the enemy with everything you have, all at once, where it matters most. Because the moment you divide your army, you become vulnerable. You give the enemy the chance to defeat you in detail, destroying your separated units one by one before they can support each other. There's a reason for the old axiom, he who defends everything defends nothing. Spread your forces too thin and you're strong nowhere. This is the cardinal sin of warfare, the unforgivable mistake. And yet,
Some of history's greatest victories came from commanders who deliberately committed this sin.
Here's the paradox. Dividing your forces is catastrophically dangerous, but when it works, it doesn't just win battles, it achieves the impossible. Consider Hannibal at Cannae, 216 BC. He intentionally weakened his center and strengthened his flanks, dividing his army into three separate elements. The Romans crashed into his weak center, exactly as he predicted. Then his flanks enveloped them from both sides. 50,000 Romans slaughtered in a single afternoon. The most perfect tactical victory in military history. But if the Romans had broken through his center too quickly, or if his flanks had failed to coordinate, Hannibal's divided army would have been destroyed piecemeal. Now consider Custer at Little Bighorn, 1876. He divided his regiment into three separate battalions to attack a Native American village from multiple directions. The plan required perfect timing and communication. He got neither. The battalions couldn't support each other.
Custer's force was isolated and annihilated. The decision to divide his forces turned a potential victory into a legendary massacre. Or look at Robert E. Lee at Chancellorsville, 1863. Facing a Union army twice his size, Lee did the unthinkable. He divided his force not once, but twice. First, splitting off Stonewall Jackson's corps to march around the Union flank, then staying behind with an even smaller force to hold the center. For hours, Lee's army existed in three fragments, each one vulnerable to destruction. One Confederate officer called it the most audacious decision in American military history. It worked. Jackson's surprise attack shattered the Union right. Lee won his most brilliant victory. But it required absolute precision, flawless timing, and Jackson's death from friendly fire proved how razor-thin the margin for error truly was.
It's the first rule they teach you in any military academy on Earth. Never divide your forces in the face of the enemy. It's written in every tactical manual, drilled into every officer candidate, repeated by every military theorist from Sun Tzu to Clausewitz, the principle of concentration of force. Mass your strength at the decisive point. Hit the enemy with everything you have, all at once, where it matters most. Because the moment you divide your army, you become vulnerable. You give the enemy the chance to defeat you in detail, destroying your separated units one by one before they can support each other. There's a reason for the old axiom, he who defends everything defends nothing. Spread your forces too thin and you're strong nowhere. This is the cardinal sin of warfare, the unforgivable mistake. And yet, some of history's greatest victories came from commanders who deliberately committed this sin.
Here's the paradox. Dividing your forces is catastrophically dangerous, but when it works, it doesn't just win battles, it achieves the impossible. Consider Hannibal at Cannae, 216 BC. He intentionally weakened his center and strengthened his flanks, dividing his army into three separate elements. The Romans crashed into his weak center, exactly as he predicted. Then his flanks enveloped them from both sides. 50,000 Romans slaughtered in a single afternoon. The most perfect tactical victory in military history. But if the Romans had broken through his center too quickly, or if his flanks had failed to coordinate, Hannibal's divided army would have been destroyed piecemeal. Now consider Custer at Little Bighorn, 1876. He divided his regiment into three separate battalions to attack a Native American village from multiple directions. The plan required perfect timing and communication. He got neither. The battalions couldn't support each other.
Custer's force was isolated and annihilated. The decision to divide his forces turned a potential victory into a legendary massacre. Or look at Robert E. Lee at Chancellorsville, 1863. Facing a Union army twice his size, Lee did the unthinkable. He divided his force not once, but twice. First, splitting off Stonewall Jackson's corps to march around the Union flank, then staying behind with an even smaller force to hold the center. For hours, Lee's army existed in three fragments, each one vulnerable to destruction. One Confederate officer called it the most audacious decision in American military history. It worked. Jackson's surprise attack shattered the Union right. Lee won his most brilliant victory. But it required absolute precision, flawless timing, and Jackson's death from friendly fire proved how razor-thin the margin for error truly was.
June 5th, 1944. Southwick House, England. 4 in the morning.
The invasion fleet is loaded. 150,000 men crammed into ships, landing craft, and transport planes. They've been briefed, equipment checked, final letters written home. They're ready. The entire armada is poised like a coiled spring. And the weather is falling apart. Eisenhower sits in the library with his senior commanders. Rain lashes the windows. Wind howls across the channel. His chief meteorologist, Group Captain Stagg, delivers the assessment. A storm system has moved in. High winds, heavy cloud cover, rough seas. But there's a narrow window, a brief break in the weather, maybe 36 hours, starting tomorrow. It's not ideal. It's barely acceptable. But it might be the only chance. Eisenhower's mind runs through the variables at impossible speed. If he postpones, the next suitable tide won't come for another month. Another month means the Germans strengthen their defenses.
Another month means potential intelligence leaks, the whole operation compromised. Another month means Stalin's patience runs out. But if he goes ahead in marginal weather, the consequences could be catastrophic. Paratroopers will scatter across Normandy in high winds, landing miles from their objectives, isolated and vulnerable. Landing craft will be swamped in rough seas. Bombers won't be able to see their targets through cloud cover. Naval gunfire support will be less accurate. The meteorologist can't guarantee anything. Churchill is watching. Montgomery is cautious. The Americans are ready to go. And 150,000 men are waiting for Eisenhower to decide their fate. This is the loneliness of command in its purest form. Later that day, Eisenhower will write 2 letters. The first announces the successful landing, credits the courage of Allied forces, and claims victory. The second takes full responsibility for failure.
Our landings have failed, and I have withdrawn the troops, it reads. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. He writes the second letter first. Across the channel, the German High Command is complacent. Rommel, the one German general who might stop the invasion, has left his post to visit his wife for her birthday. He's convinced the weather makes an invasion impossible. Hitler is asleep at Berchtesgaden and has given orders not to be disturbed. German commanders along the Atlantic Wall are conducting training exercises, confident the Allies won't come in this weather.
June 6, 1944. 0:30. The plan immediately falls apart. 13,000 American paratroopers jump into darkness over Normandy. High winds scatter them across the French countryside like leaves in a storm. Entire units land miles from their objectives. The 82nd and 101st Airborne are supposed to secure key bridges and road junctions. Instead, they're fragmented into dozens of isolated groups, stumbling through hedgerows in the dark, trying to find anyone from their own unit. Some drop zones miss by 6 miles. Paratroopers land in flooded fields and drown, weighed down my equipment. Others come down in the middle of German positions. By dawn, the airborne divisions exist only as scattered clusters of lost soldiers, with no communication, no coordination, and no idea where they are. Exactly what the doctrine warned against. Divided forces. Isolated. Vulnerable. At Utah Beach, the landing craft drift off course in the current.
Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., 56 years old, walking with a cane, the only general to land with the first wave, realizes they've come ashore more than a mile south of the intended position. He makes an instant decision. We'll start the war from right here. By sheer luck, they've landed at a less defended sector. Utah becomes the day's only clear success. At Omaha Beach, hell opens up. The first wave hits the beach at 6:30 a.m. German machine guns positioned on the bluffs have perfect overlapping fields of fire. Artillery has every yard pre-registered. Within minutes, the beach becomes a slaughter. Landing craft are destroyed before they reach shore. Men wade through chest-deep water directly into gunfire. Bodies pile up at the waterline. Entire units are pinned down, unable to advance, unable to retreat. By mid-morning, Omaha is on the verge of complete failure. The divided forces cannot support each other.
Gold and Juno beaches are miles away, fighting their own battles. Utah is too far to help.
The paratroopers are scattered and can't relieve the pressure. Omaha is alone, exactly as the military manuals predicted would happen. And then, improvisation saves the day. Not from generals, from sergeants and junior officers. Small groups of soldiers find gaps in the defenses. They use Bangalore torpedoes to blow holes through wire. They scale the bluffs under fire. They attack German positions from unexpected angles. Colonel George Taylor shouts what becomes the rallying cry. 2 kinds of people are staying on this beach: the dead and those who are going to die.
By nightfall on June 6th, the beaches were secured. The Atlantic Wall was breached. Hitler's fortress Europe had been cracked open. But the cost was staggering. 10,000 Allied casualties on D-Day alone. 4,000 confirmed dead. Thousands more wounded, missing, or captured. In the weeks that followed, the numbers climbed relentlessly. The hedgerow fighting in Normandy became a grinding war of attrition. Every field was a fortress, every lane a killing zone. By the time the Allies broke out in August, the casualty count had reached over 200,000. Was it worth it? Some historians argue the invasion was unnecessarily risky. The Allies could have landed in southern France, where the fences were weaker. They could have waited another 6 months to build overwhelming force, eliminating any possibility of failure. They could have let the Soviets bear more of the burden, while strategic bombing continued to destroy German industry.
But here's what those arguments ignore. Time was not neutral. Every day of delay meant thousands more Jews murdered in concentration camps. Auschwitz was operating at peak efficiency in the spring of 1944. The gas chambers ran day and night. Every week the Allies waited, entire communities were erased. Every month of hesitation meant tens of thousands more Soviet soldiers dying on the Eastern Front, fighting alone against the bulk of the Wehrmacht. Every delay gave German scientists more time to develop wonder weapons, the V-2 rockets, jet aircraft, potentially even atomic weapons. Strategic necessity doesn't care about perfect conditions. Sometimes you have to roll the dice when the odds aren't in your favor, because waiting only makes them worse. Eisenhower never publicly second-guessed the decision, but in private moments, he acknowledged the terrible burden. He kept that unsent letter, the one accepting full responsibility for failure, in his wallet for the rest of his life, a reminder of how close it came to disaster, how easily his name could have joined the list of commanders destroyed by dividing their forces. Because success doesn't vindicate risk, it only obscures how close disaster was. Consider the commanders who made similar decisions and failed. The British at Gallipoli in World War I, landing on multiple beaches against Turkish defenses. Catastrophic failure. Operation Market Garden in 1944, just 3 months after D-Day, where Montgomery divided Allied forces across multiple objectives in Holland. Thousands of paratroopers surrounded and destroyed at Arnhem. The same decision, the same violation of doctrine, different outcomes.
So why do commanders keep making this decision? Why do they keep dividing their forces, violating doctrine, breaking the cardinal rules they've spent their entire careers learning? Why risk everything when the safe path is right there? Because warfare rewards boldness. Defensive strategies rarely win wars. They buy time, they preserve forces, they avoid catastrophic defeat, but they don't achieve victory. To win, someone eventually has to take the offensive, to attack, to take ground, to force the enemy into a decisive confrontation. And offensive operations, by their nature, require risk. History doesn't remember the cautious commanders who avoided disaster. It remembers the ones who took calculated risks and changed the world. We remember D-Day, not the dozens of invasion plans that were drafted and abandoned because they were too dangerous. We remember Hannibal's brilliance at Cannae, not the Carthaginian generals who played it safe and lost slowly.
Here's the paradox. The most dangerous decision is dangerous precisely because it can work. If dividing your forces guaranteed failure, no one would do it. But when it succeeds, it doesn't just win battles. It achieves the impossible. It turns the tide of history. And that possibility, that chance at greatness, is intoxicating. Every commander knows the risks. Every officer has studied the failures. They've read about Custer at Little Bighorn. They've analyzed Market Garden.
They know the doctrine exists for a reason, written in the blood of armies that violated it and paid the price. But they also know that sometimes the situation demands the dangerous decision, when every safe option leads to slow defeat, when time is against you, when the stakes are absolute. And here's the thing, this isn't just about battlefields. Every person faces their own version of this decision at some point in life.
The moment when playing it safe guarantees slow failure, but taking a calculated risk could lead to breakthrough or catastrophe. Starting the business, making the move, taking the stand, dividing your resources when conventional wisdom says to consolidate. The question isn't whether the risk exists, it always exists. The question is whether the alternative is worse. Remember where we started, a commander standing in the silence before the order, the weight of lives in the balance, the awareness that what comes next cannot be undone. June 5, 1944, Eisenhower stands alone after giving the order. The room has cleared. The commanders have dispersed to their units. The machinery of war is in motion. 150,000